Hi, my name is Aaron Kiefer, and I'm an arborist community expert here to talk to you today about adjusting your friction hitch. There's many different climbing lines out there and many different types of friction hitches, and exploring with different combinations will help you find one that grabs when you put your weight in it, but is also not impossible to advance when you take your weight out of it. So let's think through some of the different things that we can change. First being, when we have a friction hitch that's tied with too long of ends, when we advance it, it may open up and then it does not want to grab, and so it'll just slide around. It won't grab. Now, the opposite is true if we have a friction hitch that is tied with too short a piece of cordage, and you have to almost force the tails downwards to get them into the carabiner. It causes a pinch point up here, and when you go to advance it, it's hard to advance because of that friction. So this is a 24-inch prusik. It's tied the way I typically tie it for my weight, but in this case, it's not very effective. I would need a longer hitch line to be more effective with this. And if I take any wraps out of this configuration, I know it's not going to be what I need to hold me. So that's definitely something to keep in mind when you have a friction hitch. You can adjust the amount of friction by the wraps and the braids. This is a VT, and so the wraps at the top, if I adjust how many there are, that's going to affect it a lot as far as how much friction there is, and the braids is going to affect it not quite as much, but still affect how much friction there is. And so exploring around with, again, your combination of climbing line and hitch cord, and how many wraps you need and how many twists you need in your braid so that it terminates where there's not too much or too little prusik left to cause either a binding or not grabbing of your climbing hitch. Now, something else that can affect it is the type of the size we have. So here's an 8-inch and here is a 10-inch prusik. The 10 millimeter prusik is a little bigger than I would recommend. You can use it, but I would be very cautious because they sometimes have a tendency not to grab when you go to advance. They want to open up. They will work just like it's been used before on the tail of a climbing line, not a tail, the bitter end. The bitter end of your climbing line is used to tie a second system, and it's the exact same diameter. That works with a Blake's hitch, but when we have these friction hitches, sometimes this does not grab as well. So I recommend a 8 millimeter climbing hitch for most of our climbing lines that are 11 to 12 millimeters. And then the last thing we want to think about is how it interacts with our pulley. Whether we have a hitch climber or a pinto or some other micro pulley, we want to think how it interacts. So if I take this pinto pulley here and I go to advance my line, it pulls this termination into the pulley and pinches the line and cause friction that I don't want to be there when I'm advancing it. So sometimes switching to a different pulley, I recommend the hitch climber. It works very well and it separates the two termination points and keeps them away from the climbing line and keeps that friction from being there when you go to advance it. Take some time with your climbing line and your hitch and figure out what works best for you. Practice it low and slow, as with everything, so that you don't get hurt in a tree. Keep safety in mind, climb safe. We'll see you at the top.